the living legend and seed of God, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
Fine and dandy. I'm not sure I earned that this week.
Yeah,
Apparently I need to wear
always.
more descriptive T-shirts with words in them.
Stop it! You're telling people the behind the scenes of how I get your
Secrets?
name.
No, not our secrets. If anybody wants to see what I'm talking about, you should definitely tune in. Roughly 7:30 Australian Eastern Summertime, Twitch, YouTube, and you can see what we're talking about. But
Yes.
how are you this week? You have survived another week without the Rona?
I have survived another week without the Rona that I'm aware of, at the very least, because I could possibly have it and be asymptomatic. Who knows? But I am feeling fine and dandy. Been a crazy week. I've had renovations on Fried Brain Studios, whole new floors put in. It's been a thing, but the floors are looking special, and have moved things around a little bit. You can see something that I will be talking about a lot on the show. We've got a Critical Role pops there because the Critical Role show is coming to Amazon on the 28th. Woo! Next week. Basically,
I'm looking forward to this because I don't understand what this show is. I don't get
it. I am so interested to see how you react to it. Have you watched any trailers?
It sounds like Gogglebox for nerds.
Well, the animated show is literally an animated show of the stories of that. It is not them live playing or anything like that at the same time. That is the Critical Role thing. This is entirely based off of the first campaign, and they're now on to the third one.
Anyway, that's something to look forward to. We will hear a bit more about that when we get to it.
Yes.
Our chain movie this week was chosen by me, of course, the 90s classic Reality Bites. Should we crack on with the show? I mean, I think it might be a shorter show this week because I know you've been busy, and I've actually been kind of consumed by just one or two things. So, but I think also, hopefully you've come up with your 2021 list of top 5 films.
I've got a list. I actually wrote it down as well, so I will talk it through. But a little teaser for that section as it comes through. Feeling a little light on quality movies for last year. Definitely consumed.
It was a difficult task. It was not an easy thing for me to come up with 5 that I felt like really deserved it.
Yeah, and to be fair, 2 of them were from the year before, but I didn't get around to actually seeing them until this year. So
I'll allow it.
I'll allow it. But I think it was definitely, having been in lockdown, I think we needed more of that meaty, I need lots of content. So looking back at the TV shows that I've watched, it's like, oh, there's some really good ones to talk about. But we'll get to that later.
I think there's 2 things that you and I have both watched this week. One of which is the chain movie, which we might get to in the first hour of this week for a change. But the other one, and I thought it might be an interesting place to start, was the new James Gunn DC HBO Max, if you're in America, show. Peacemaker. So this is a spin-off of the James Gunn Suicide Squad film that came out last year. I recall, I know I really liked it. I think you did as well.
Yeah.
And I think we were both, actually, I think you mentioned it last week during your Fast 9 review, how pleasantly surprised we all were by John Cena's performance in that film. And probably most of the films we see him in, really, he's actually got a reasonably good sense of comic timing.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to take the piss out of himself. And yes, in case you are watching and you're wondering, George is drinking out of a Viking horn. There is a story, but I'm not going to bore you with it, other than to say, yes, he does fully intend on invading Britain later, after dinner, though.
Yeah, after dinner. Got to have my supper.
But I think we're all a bit surprised when it comes to, pro wrestlers becoming actors. It's becoming a real thing now. We've got Dwayne Johnson, of course, Dave Bautista's probably gone the more serious route. He was in June, he was in Blade Runner, in addition, of course, to Drax. But John Cena, I think he realizes which side his bread's buttered on, and he does comedy and action pretty well, apart from Fast 9, apparently. But so this is I guess you would say, a black comedy kind of action show.
Definitely. I would say this is probably the closest return to James Gunn Super era that we have seen since Super. It is much, much darker than any of his other offerings that have been in Hollywood to date. For obvious reasons, he's been doing a lot more of the sort of like Disney umbrella stuff, and DC, whilst they do definitely like to be a little bit more edgy, they still are very mainstream. This, straight off the bat, is gritty, and it feels almost like a B movie. It definitely follows on from the Suicide Squad, but it takes that next step or two along the "we're gonna fuck with your expectations" kind of thing.
But that said, only if you have the wrong kind of expectations. If you are familiar with James Gunn's work to date, as you mentioned, Super, or where he started doing trauma films, or if you saw Slither, like I think might have been his first feature.
Think so?
He's not afraid of a bit of blood and gore. The difference is the budget is higher now, so the blood and gore looks better than he did when he was doing trauma films like Romeo and Juliet. Oh yeah, he worked on that one. That's a thing. That really exists. I've seen it. So for those who are if you haven't seen Suicide Squad and you're curious about this, first things first, my strongest recommendation would be to see Suicide Squad before you start this series. It's going to make a lot more sense to you. You're going to give a lot more of a shit about the characters. Yes. And this film, even the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes, is going to spoil the end of Suicide Squad for you with what happened. So that's going to make it a lot less fun to see Suicide Squad after seeing Peacemaker. So strongest possible recommendation to see Suicide. Plus, it's fucking awesome. I think, it was fucking awesome. But anyway, so Peacemaker is played by John Cena. He has been raised by his father to be the ultimate killing machine. His father's a soldier or something. I think I recall.
Played by the brilliant Robert Patrick.
And he's been taught to kill with every conceivable type of weapon, from from knee high to a grasshopper. So now he's like the ultimate kind of non-enhanced super soldier, shall we say? He is what happens in Suicide Squad, and I'm not going to spoil that. I mean, I know it came out 6 months ago, but I really want people to see it. He ends up surviving the events. I guess as a spoiler here, this is set after the events of Suicide Squad. He survived the events of that film and finds himself waking up in hospital after the finale of that film, only to be released. And instead of going back to jail where he starts in Suicide Squad, he goes back to I guess his hometown and his trailer. Whereupon he's hit upon by the same people behind the goings on in Suicide Squad. I forget the actual agency's name. Viola Davis's agency.
Amanda Walker.
Anyway, so the people who took him out of jail and put him into the Suicide Squad require him to continue working for them in order to remain out of jail. There's been a new command force or a new task force created, which he'll be part of. Some of the people in that task force were in Suicide Squad and were involved in some of the more important events of that film's conclusion and are being punished as a result of those events. And their punishment is to work with Peacemaker, which gives you something of an idea about his character.
Task X.
So Task X.
Yes.
After making a miraculous recovery, Peacemaker returns home only to discover that his freedom comes at a price. That price is he's now being able to be utilized as an assassin to kill people who Task Force X don't want to be alive anymore.
And the only real the project code name that they have for this is Project Butterfly, and it's quite a nice little wink and nod to the absurdity of some of these project names, as it was like Project Starfish was one of the MacGuffins that they're talking about in the Suicide Squad movie, and he just explains that, and it's like, okay, you're not very inventive with your project naming. What's it going to be? And they don't really go into it at all in the first episode. I haven't watched the second one yet. But it's a good kind of natural feed in for it. And it's surprisingly humbling opening. It hits the ground running, and it still has that same feel and attitude that the Suicide Squad had. But through the lens of Peacemaker, it's a little sadder than kind of what I was anticipating. It's almost, there's almost a touch of kind of the feel that you get in some of the post-Vietnam wars of the soldiers coming back and how society treated them differently a little bit. There's almost an element of that. It's mixed in with the fact that he's been in prison for all this time and life has moved on and people have just forgotten him. And there's this sadness to his return in spite of what you know about this character. So I'm like, okay, I'm feeling oddly conflicted here because John Cena, like I've said in the past, he's very good at eliciting an emotion from you. And that's part of what was important about him during his WWE run. He was the face of WWE for so long, and he was a hated guy. He was bipolar in the audience. People either loved him or just detested him, and he was good at playing both those sides. And so in this role, he's kind of perfect for it because he is unabashedly a psychopath, but he's endearing in it's almost that childlike innocence.
But that great line in Suicide Squad who goes, I adore peace, and I don't care how many men, women, and children I have to kill to achieve it.
Yes.
Which is actually a really beautiful summation of the, twisted, almost like the evil Captain America in Captain America, the Winter Soldier TV show earlier last year. But they didn't do it anywhere near as eloquently.
Yeah. But it just really, I was kind of stunned by what the first episode served up in the tone and the style that it was in. It's got that kind of Planet Terror / Grindhouse sort of feel to it a little bit, like the Suicide Squad had that kind of rough around the edges kind of feel, but it was designed to be that way. And like I said, the immediate level of emotion that comes through from it, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting something a bit more straight-laced comedy, but I'm really liking it.
You're right. In a way, I kind of feel like we'll see. I mean, I've only seen episode 1 as well. There are 3 out there at the moment. We'll see. Well, I think I don't know how many episodes there are. Probably 8 or 9, something like that. But I think this show, I have a feeling, will actually prove what you and I have been saying is the strength of having your own TV channel. Is you choose how to tell your story. And for some reason, for about 8 episodes, by the way, James Gunn and Cena just seem to have clicked on this character and decided to do this spin-off. But they've got now 8 hours, essentially, probably a bit less, 7, 8 hours. I don't know how long each episode is, to tell a very interesting story about this character. So episodes are about 45 minutes long. So, 7 hours or so to tell a story about this character. Obviously, in the movie, you're right. He just comes across as a cocky, psychopath who, is something of an antagonist and a protagonist at the same time. And he's not necessarily the most likable character of the bunch in that film, but that's kind of what he had to be in that film. And you've got 90 minutes, 2 hours to tell the story. Whereas now we've got 7.5, 8 hours. We can really deep dive into the psychology of a character like that. And you're right. I mean, he is kind of an arsehole. He's obnoxious. He's sexist. He's racist, which is, I don't think racism has been funnier for a particularly long time. It's the conversation between John Cena and the janitor in the hospital. But we that's all these horrible things. But then James Gunn is actually going, okay, well, but why is he like that? You know, and that's what we don't get on a lot of those sort of two-dimensional villains, especially the ones we see Marvel use so often. You know, like, okay, in this first episode, we meet his dad. His dad's a prick who hates him and puts him down and says, "You're a Nancy boy." He just survived having a building fall on him at the end of the film, and he's a Nancy boy, you know, and he's all these things. His dad's obviously, for a couple months, an absolutely wretched racist himself.
Yeah.
So when you sort of see that and you go, this is where he's come from, you know, and you're right, it's an unusually poignant sort of kicking off for a series that we expected to be hilarious and violent, maybe exciting, but we didn't expect it to be kind of moving and thought-provoking. And I think that's so far looking what's going to elevate this. That and the last element, the fucking soundtrack are the elements that are going to elevate this, beyond, at least as far as first episode 1 is going. It looks like it's going to elevate it well and truly above pretty much everything Disney did with the Marvel TV shows last year.
Yeah, I would say it certainly hit the ground stronger than any of the other first episodes of those ones. I think one of the big telling points for me is the level of intelligence of storytelling that is going into the dissection of this character, and just those little tiny beats of him, like seeing one of his teammates on the street and him just kind of weighing it up of, okay, am I going to be a bit stalkery? Am I just going to drive on? Just those little moments of him just playing that thought out and just see you get these visual identifiers of him weighing it up and just going, okay, I'm lonely, I want company. And so that's what I need. It's not, he doesn't look at it as thinking that's stalkery behavior. There's justification to his thought process, which I
think he's basically playing this character as a giant man-child. He is a 10-year-old boy. Because of the way he was raised, he's never had that kind of a level of emotional maturity to learn the kind of empathy necessary to think about how his actions make the people around him feel. His way of acting towards others is purely transactional. I want sex, hence I will proposition you in a bar for sex, not thinking for a second about how that's going to make him seem, or you know, how that will look to the person who's propositioning.
And that's another telling difference to the times where they have had these good villains in MCU, but they've never kind of gone into why they are like that. Like, they tried doing it a little bit with Loki, but then it ended up just getting lost and they just kind of forgot about it. Whereas this certainly seems so far to be a much more analytical breakdown of this character as to why, and justifications for his past reasons, and maybe some form of redemption or a solidifying of his ethos and ideology to a point where it's like, yeah, no, this is who I am happy with this, now you deal with it. And it's a level of intelligence that James Gunn has always shown in how he approaches things. Like, for me, one of the best things about Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was the father-son relationship triangle between Star-Lord, Ego, and Yondu, and how that all played out. And again, it was a little bit of man-child syndrome for Star-Lord, but it still had that emotional beat, and they've already kind of hit that beat of emotion in a very complex, interesting character straight off the bat that it's got me invested for sure.
I think maybe people are thinking, well, this sounds a bit wanky for me, you know, this is a think piece or something. No. This is still exactly what you think it is.
Yeah.
It's just that and this as well. If you,
it's a still Pixar kind of thing of, you can absolutely enjoy this on a surface level, but at the same time, when you look at it, you suddenly go, oh, there's much more adult fare in Wall-E, and any of the classic Pixar movies that you can investigate deeper into it. And I just really latched onto that deeper stuff. And I'll say this as well: the action sequence in this at the end of episode 1 was great. It played a little bit like an 80s action movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Commando style, in the apartment, so like just throwing each other around like rag dolls. And the absurdity of it, it felt like an 80s or early 90s action movie, but it still absolutely fit with the rest of the way that we've been presented with the world of Peacemaker. Fantastic.
I'm very curious to find out what that was all about, because it certainly didn't play out the way one expected. And just another shout out, because I just touched on it before. James Gunn is responsible for the soundtrack to this film. I believe he's the music director of, or what do you want to call it? He's chosen all of it, and it's a brilliant selection of 80s hair metal, which I know I've seen him talk about it on Twitter before. I know he's a bit of a fan of that kind of thing. And I found myself, while I was watching it, actually Googling some of the bands that were being mentioned, just seeing where Peacemaker flips through someone's record collection. And I'm like, I've never heard of any of these bands before. Like, and I'm a little older than you. I remember the tail end of the hair metal thing. The first record I ever wanted to buy was Open Up and Say Ah by Poison. And my parents wouldn't let me because they were convinced they was satanic. And like, the idea of Poison being satanic is kind of hilarious. So I was thinking about girls and cars and stuff like that. But it was the 80s. That's what we did. So I remember Motley Crue and Poison and that kind of thing, and I quite liked some of those bands at the time. But these ones these were deep cuts. Like, these were some serious hair metal aficionado stuff.
It's kind of the 80s variation of Tarantino's 70s obsession, and I love that, because these guys just have this deep well of I know and love this music, and they incorporate it into these modern media so well that it's one of the reasons why I love so much 70s and 80s stuff, is because of Tarantino having pulled it and brought it in. It's like, this is an introduction to some of the best fucking music ever. This is great. And I'm loving the music. The opening dance routine of the title credits for Peacemaker, that song is awesome.
I found myself thinking, this is actually a kind of an overlooked and forgotten genre of music in a way. It's not one that gets a lot of love anymore. Like, there's not been a real revival of that style of music. You had 80s synth pop came back in the late 90s. Yeah. A lot of 80s music is held in very high regard now by hipsters. The whole Toto thing came back, but there's not a lot of love for that genre of hair metal.
The closest that I can kind of think of is The Darkness, and that was 15 years ago.
The Darkness were part of that, and I remember actually being quite a fan of theirs, and they were kind of unique in that sense that they really did have that, the tight spandex jumpsuits and the electric guitars and the over-the-top film clips and stuff like that. And you were never quite sure whether it was a piss take or whether they were legit, right? You're right, The Darkness were
the Christmas song.
But they were kind of alone in that sense. They came and they went, and you're right, that would have been the mid 2005, 2006. Yeah. So that's a long time ago now. And I mean, it is what it is. Like, so maybe some genres of music don't need to be revived. They should just be left where they are. And we can, we can just quickly a little glance back and go, yeah, okay, look, new metal. It seemed cool at the time, but we don't need that back. But that said, it suits the character particularly well.
Yeah.
For anybody, that car he's got, his sidekick is an eagle called Eagly, which is brilliant. I don't know if that's in the comic books. If not, it's genius.
Regardless, it's brilliantly played.
It also it's subtly meta and references its place in the universe. Like, he's having an argument with someone about Aquaman having sex with fish and stuff like that. And you're not a superhero. Batman's a superhero. And you're like, okay, cool. I like that they're setting it up that he exists in this universe. Does that mean it's part of a DCEU? Probably not.
Who knows? No, I don't think even the people working on DC movies right now know if there's actually a DC EU. I think it's just a nebulous thing that you can kind of go, if you want to use that character, sure, it's DC EU. You want to get that character?
Shazam referenced Superman, of course. So,
yes.
Come on, guys, you make up your mind.
Nah, they're not going to do it.
Either way, I'm looking forward to watching the next couple episodes. I probably would have absolutely binged them, but there's been some other things on my plate, which you'll hear about later on. But it's a really nice introduction. I think it just goes to show, right, that I think Disney made a massive mistake in firing him from Guardians 3. I mean, they're going to get it anyway, but they're getting it late.
Yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity for DC,
and James Gunn. It worked out brilliantly for him because DC. I don't know, obviously I wasn't there, but it looks like they've kind of come to him and gone, "You can do whatever you fucking want." Yeah. I don't know if they came and said we want to do Suicide Squad again, or they said, "Here's here's the book. Pick one.
What would you like?"
And he's kind of had his pick. To go, I'm sure they didn't say we'd like you to do that.
That's the thing that is very important to remember for James Gunn in particular. When I was thinking about this the other day, the importance of having people who know how to use their medium, and I think a culprit of over self-flagellation maybe is Chris Nolan, where his movies are just getting longer and longer and longer, and the concepts are cool, but he's not actually delivering a full story. He's not. There's one or two things that just don't quite fit right with it. James Gunn has always, just from the very beginning, he's worked on a minimal budget. He's worked fast and efficient. You think about the time that the Suicide Squad movie finished to this coming out. It's maybe 18 months if you extend it far, and he's got a whole season done. 8 episodes. Written, directed, edited, music scored, done. Everything. And that's fucking impressive. He knows how to work quick. He knows how to keep the budget low. This guy is a dream for DC that needed a win and just went, here you go. Do what you want. Here's $200 million. That's a low budget for us. Do what you want with that. He did. They loved it. People loved it. Audience really liked it. And it was enough for them to go, yeah, keep going. See what you do on HBO. We need content for our channel. Do it.
I don't know I think this has been a bigger chance for him rather in the sense that he just kind of got, I don't know. I kind of like to think he came in and said, I'll do it, but I'll do it my way. That means an R rating. The US R rating. And I don't want to be doing another Disney film here, which is done twice now. But I don't know how well it worked out for DC in the sense of, or Warner Brothers in the sense that, like, I think Suicide Squad was kind of a flop at the box office. I know, I think maybe it came out on HBO Max at the same time. They're always hard to kind of square that circle. But it grossed 167 against a $185 million budget. Despite the fact it's a fucking great movie, I think, the best thing DC's done to date. But only they know whether the numbers stack up by the number of people who watched it on HBO.
I think the win for DC Warner Brothers on this side is that the audience, there is a rabid audience for the love of this, for the love of James Gunn. So they have kind of got a bit of a gift in the hand of audience favor, where so many of their previous movies with the DCEU have been lukewarm at best. And it's like, there's some good bits in there. There was never strong defenders one way or another, really. Everyone was kind of middling. There's no massive fan bases. Like, no, Man of Steel is the best fucking Superman movie of all time.
Au contraire. There are a lot of Snyder fans out there. They got their fucking extended edition, which wasn't terrible, but there are a lot of fans of those Snyder Superman movies. They're out there.
That's fair, but it's not as big as these, or certainly not as the Snyder stuff it's really hard to boil down where that actually comes from. But then you think of the Wonder Womans, you think of the stuff going on with Batman and Ben Affleck's involvement with it, and the Joss Whedon stuff, and all of that stuff. There's a lot of baggage around every project. The Suicide Squad came in, and it had that opportunity of DC came in and plucked James Gunn. James Gunn was so good. He did 2 fantastic Guardians of the Galaxy. There was this hubbub about stuff on Twitter from years ago, but they've moved on. They've taken this opportunity and they just kept that ball rolling. And now they've got Black Adam coming out on riding the crest of the rock wave that seems to be trying to engulf everything. And there's the love for Michael Keaton coming back as Batman for the Flashpoint movie. It's worked out rather nicely for them to just push this kind of good vibes about their movies rather than, oh shit, they've had so many production problems and directors exiting and coming back. And for the first time in the DCEU history, it feels like these movies are just being created by people that love them, and they're just making their babies.
I would hope it's that good. I mean, like we'll see with Black Adam that's being directed by a complete hack. So you know, I'll believe it when I see it. But I'm glad this one worked out. Maybe they should have given him more money and said, "Can you be our new Zack Snyder daddy?" And just be our Kevin Feige. What was the guy's name? Jeff Johns. Who was the overview of the whole thing, who just had no idea what he was doing, apparently. Maybe that would have worked. But maybe
Jeff Johns was in the comics industry. It's a different medium. Poor guy. He was probably having a mental breakdown straight away.
I don't know. Was Kevin Feige from the comics industry? He wasn't, I don't think.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Jeff Johns came from the comics industry.
I came from, sorry. Well, he probably had a head start that others didn't. Maybe if the film industry wasn't for him, but if nothing else, also props to James Gunn because he's super active on Twitter and he's always answering fans. And I dig that about him. He's not out there like some people like Ryan Johnson and what's her face, when he directed Charlie's Angels, dissing people on Twitter, going, "Oh, if you don't like my movie, you're a sexist," or whatever, just abusing their fans. Not to say the fans don't deserve it sometimes, but I like how James engages with his audience. It's nice.
Yeah.
While we're talking superheroes, can I move sideways for a second? Have you had a chance to see the trailer for Moon Knight?
Yes, I did.
I am not very familiar with Moon Knight, but I've heard people say he's a bit like what Batman would be if Batman had dissociative disorder. He's sort of a Marvel
that's
Batman.
been my understanding of it as well, and I'm curious with this. I don't really know anything about Moon Knight. I love Oscar Isaac as an actor, so I'm in. I trust him. I don't know anything about the production team. I don't know who's being the head honcho of this, who's created it, or anything like that. The trailer looks interesting. It looks a bit darker and more suspect than a lot of the other stuff that we've seen come through Disney Marvel, which has got me curious. So yeah, I'm keen to see what they serve up.
It's an interesting one. Like we don't know anything about the character, but I think obviously somebody does. Like if you've read the comic books, he's been around since the mid-70s. The involvement of someone as prominent as Oscar Isaac is super, super impressive. Looping in Ethan Hawke as the villain, I assume, is an interesting choice going against type for Ethan Hawke. You don't see him playing a villain terribly often. I was curious about him. Like it looks different to anything else we've seen on Disney Plus today.
There is one red flag.
Yes.
It seems to be set in England, and pretty much anytime movies are set in England and they are more Americanized, they usually aren't that good. Think Thor: The Dark World. Think V for Vendetta.
Big parts of Endgame were set in England, though. parts of Captain America Winter Soldier were shot over there, I think.
That was Scotland.
Scotland. All part of England anyway, isn't it? It's all the same thing.
I know a few Scottish people that will be right.
They're too pussy to vote themselves out of a union, then they earned it. Should we move? I think we talked about Ethan Hawke. Should we just slide on the Ethan Hawke bandwagon, or you got anything else you'd like to say first?
I was just going to quickly ask: have you, aside from today's episode, have you watched any more of Book of Boba Fett?
I haven't watched today's episode yet. No.
Okay.
I watched the one from last week.
We'll save that for next week then. Yeah, cool. All right, yeah, let's go on to Chain Movie of the Week.
I just thought the Ethan Hawke link was just too juicy to leave alone. I know we're in superhero professional. Very, very. I picked this one last week. So the previous week we had Titan AE, I think it was, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I chose to follow somebody. Janeane Garofalo, that's right.
Yes.
Janeane Garofalo to Reality Bites. Now, it was a tight call between this and Mystery Men for me. I went with the one that had the higher IMDb rating. For some reason, this has a 6.6 and Mystery Men has a 6.1, which is disappointing because I think Mystery Men is a very funny movie for me. But anyway, I've seen both of them, but I hadn't seen this one in a long time. Reality Bites was released in 1994. It was directed by Ben Stiller, of all people. His first directorial feature, written by Helen Childress. She was 19 when she wrote this. I think this was her first screenplay.
Okay.
She has done sweet fuck all since then. I hope she got paid well. A plot revolves around a documentary filmmaker and her fellow Generation X graduates face life after college looking for work and love in Houston. We have Winona Ryder. We have Ethan Hawke, as we mentioned. She plays Leilani. Ethan Hawke plays Troy Dyer. Janeane Garofalo as Vicky. Steve Zahn as Sammy. Ben Stiller as Michael. Renee Zellweger's first ever feature credit in her career, and she has no lines. She's in one scene.
That's right.
Kissing Ethan Hawke goodbye. You might notice a couple other familiar faces of sort of popular character players. Swoosie Kurtz, you'll recognize. Look her up, you'll know her if she is. Joe Don Baker, he's in here as well.
Baker, John Mahoney.
Yes,
I think for people for Fraser.
Good morning. You'll recognize some of the familiar character roles in here. This is kind of a Gen X or maybe are you Gen X? You're a millennial, aren't you? Really?
I'm a Gen X millennial.
What year were you born?
83. I'm a millennial.
So you're right on the cusp there, but I think you might fall into the millennial bucket, which is not one you want to fall into.
Shut up. Stop it. I am in a tight mini bracket of 2 years where we are lost. We are not part of any generation. We are the genuine lost generation because we don't want to associate with any of them.
Typically people born between 81 and 86 according to Wikipedia. So I'm going to go. But anyway, you're right on the cusp. It's an unfortunate little cusp to be on. This was, I don't know if you remember this film when it came out, or you remember this. More probably what I remember is the Lisa Loeb song that came out along with this film, Stay by Lisa Loeb and Nine Tails.
Oh, shit. Yeah, that's right.
That played over the credits at the end of the film. It's not even in the film. But this is probably was really actually it was a really huge hit song. And I think it was almost really pushed the film into a lot of people's consciousness. But I think we've talked a little bit about how these days, how rare a coming of age film is for this generation. The what we call new Zeds or even millennials, millennials kind of had their moment, but it's a rare thing to see these days as the coming of age film. And if you do see one, it tends to be more like something like Licorice Pizza, which seems to be about people growing up in the 70s, which is probably, the late boomer period. There certainly weren't, I don't think, a hell of a lot of Generation X coming of age films. And I think this is one of them, and along with a film like Singles might be another one, and Slackers, the Richard Linklater film, are the only ones that I can think of off the top of my head. If you can think of one, do get in touch with us and let us know what we're missing here. But I think this is probably the most popular and I guess the most iconic coming of age film. This is the Stand By Me for Generation X.
Yeah, kind of. I think a side note why there's so few of them is partly because it was also the start of the real tech boom industry of like the possibility of what could the internet look like? What is this idea of being able to get stuff off the net? It was a burgeoning idea. So a lot of those kind of coming of age movies ended up becoming kind of tarred with that tech brush kind of thing. It's like I think of a little bit of Hackers. It's like, okay, that's kind of a coming of age movie, but not really. It's all just completely whitewashed with this tech baloney.
This is probably actually
on in the world. Yeah,
we should try and get Hackers into the mix somewhere. I bet that's aged beautifully. Like Angelina Jolie's haircut. But interestingly, I watched this with Michelle on last Friday night, and this was actually a film that she remembers very fondly as something that she watched a lot back in the days of VHS. We've talked about that, where you had 6 VHS tapes in the house.
Yes,
and you learned to love those films because it was hard to find. They're expensive and not easy to get. And it's interesting. I feel like a lot of people I've spoken to about this film this week actually have a very similar relationship with it, and there's a sense of people who were my age, maybe even a couple of years either way, kind of had this deep love affair with this film. In the sense, it's a pretty standard sort of love story, real love triangle story that you would probably find in many different eras. But this one is the one that has a very shiny, or not so shiny because it's a Gen X coat of paint. So it'll be a very grungy coat of Gen X paint over the top of it. There's two stars who are just, glowing in this film. Like it's Winona Ryder and Ethan Hawke at the absolute peak of their youth, beauty, and power.
Mm-hmm. Like never have they been more just. Doesn't matter how much dirt and grime and 3 years of drugs on them or anything like that they have. You look at them and you just go, damn.
Like Ethan Hawke is ridiculously beautiful in this film.
Yeah.
I don't know that Ethan's aged particularly well. It's a bit like when you see Tobey Maguire.
No.
You see Tobey Maguire in the new Spider-Man film, you're like, oh, you're a good-looking young fella. What happened there? But look, he's still got a career. Obviously, he's going to be in Moon Knight, like we said. But goodness, he was young and beautiful in this, and they worked together so very well.
Yeah.
So, bit of a plot here. Winona Ryder, Leilana, is the valedictorian of her college class. They've just at the start of a film. It begins with them graduating college and her giving a big anti-corporate speech. The Gen X call to war of what comes next. I don't know, which is a beautiful Gen X moment. But then they sort of enter this world where they have to start finding jobs, and perhaps young people may not remember there was a bit of a recession at the start of the 90s. I don't know if it extended as far as 94. I can't remember, but things were tough there for a little while, and so they struggled to actually, enter the real world, if you will, and find a job that she feels is worthy of her. She lives with her friend Vicky, played by Janeane Garofalo, who is kind of a little bit more accepting of her station in life, in the sense that she works at the Gap, which is a clothing store in the United States, as a manager, and kind of accepts that that's a reasonable station in life for her at this point in time. It doesn't quite have the overwhelming ambition of Leilana. Troy is their slacker friend who just sort of hangs out and sits around and watches TV and smokes weed. I knew a lot of guys like Troy back in the day. Super fucking smart. Zero drive or direction in life.
Yeah.
He sits around reading poetry and being beautiful.
Yeah, that's it. He was. I think everyone knew someone like that who was just like, he's the philosopher of our group. He can spout these amazing diatribes and quote from all these classical books, but modern culture as well. And isn't he fabulous and just so carefree? And everyone wanted to be him or do him,
or both.
Yeah.
¿Por qué no los dos? Steve Zahn is, I guess, the fourth member of a little quartet. He doesn't get a lot of screen time. He works as a bartender, I think, at the bar that Ethan Hawke's band plays at quite a bit. Who have, I can't remember his band's name, but they're awful. They have an awful name, and they are an awful band. Interestingly, here Steve Zahn's Sammy is actually is gay. And we were having a conversation after this film and sort of going, this probably would have been a little bit edgy back in 1994, having one of your main characters in a coming of age film like this be openly gay.
Yeah.
The other, unfortunately, they don't really go down that rabbit hole a lot. There is a scene where he comes out to his mother and has to leave the house to let her cool down after coming out to her. And I think that would be an interesting thing for younger audiences to see happening in this film, because I just feel like, well, if nothing else, that has moved a little bit in the subsequent 25 years, where I would hope, at least in most parts of a civilized world, apart from the South in the United States, that would be a significantly less stressful or important or scary thing to do. Not scary, but less scary.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that I definitely think out of everything that is presented in this movie, that is arguably the one that's needle has moved the most, because there's the very kind of almost tropey sequence after Winona Ryder's character gets fired and her going around to all the different job types and just door slammed in various different ways and things like that. And it's like, yeah, that hasn't really changed for younger people fresh out of college and uni. It's like, oh, you're too experienced, you're not experienced enough, and it's all the same stuff. And it's still any job you go into, it's like, oh, I want 5 years of experience by the age of 18. Thank you.
I think it's also it's interesting also that like when you, I think it's happened to me a little bit, is when you exit uni with a degree, even though my degree was in something incredibly useful like politics and history. I should have been. People used to ask me, "What do you want to do with that degree?" And I'd say, "Do you want fries of that?" I stand by that. But you do something, you've got this built up in your head. I have a degree, and you sort of walk out into the wider world expecting that to open some doors for you, only to find nobody gives a shit about your degree. I mean, at least in my field. I mean, maybe if you have a degree in nursing or something, but somewhat in demand right now. You that might be a slightly different experience, but I think for a lot of people, you kind of have that moment where you're like, hey, she's the valedictorian of her class. People have been telling her for all these years about how great she is. Only to walk into the real world and go, it's a pretty cold and rough and tumble place.
Yeah. Beyond that, I remember this movie because it was one of the movies that we were told to study for creative writing, and when I was at college, and then for acting when I went to acting school. And I don't think that is actually a good thing, because the story is kind of hackneyed. The performance is elevated above what the material is actually serving up. Winona Ryder and Ethan Hawke have got fantastic chemistry. Ben Stiller was good in it, and he directed it pretty well, but it definitely feels like a first movie, kind of testing the waters, getting his feet wet. There was certainly not the confidence of direction that he developed, and with his own characters, his more mature stuff. Like for me, one of my favorite ones of his is the Cable Guy. Brilliant satire that balanced the absurdity with that heart, like I was talking about in Peacemaker, where Jim Carrey's character is really a damaged, just wants to be loved kind of character, but he goes about it in so repeatedly wrong ways that are comical and tragic at the same time. There's not that level of maturity on display with the control of the performances or control of the script in this.
It does feel a little bit cliche. As I sort of said, it's a pretty stock love triangle story, but with a Gen X coat of paint on top of it. And as you sort of noted, some pretty engaging stars and a great soundtrack. The My Sharona scene, I think, was possibly the most memorable scene in the film.
Yeah.
Also, apparently, was a song that Quentin Tarantino wanted to use in one of his films, but had to find something else because these guys got in there first, which is, he's probably never forgiven. That's why Ben Stiller's never been in the Tarantino film. Would have made a great choice as the Bear Jew, I think, but, we will never know now.
That's a weird alternative reality. Yeah.
At one point in time, I believe that was supposed to be Adam Sandler.
Oh yeah, I remember that rumor. Yeah.
See, that would have worked.
That would have been so fitting for him as well.
He would have done that very well. But anyway, that's another in an alternate universe. Yes. What if? Episode of What If? But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure you'd say it as hackneyed. It's, I guess it's a little bit cliched if you look at it. It's a fairly by the numbers sort of film in the terms of the type of story. But I think there's some elements in there, like I said, the adding in the coming of age element in here about that discovery about what life's like in the real world, and the fact that it's not as light and fluffy as you've been led to believe is a hard lesson that a lot of people have to learn when they head out of university and hit the real world. And I think that's an interesting little element in here. I enjoy the Ethan Hawke character quite a bit. He almost reminds me of someone who might belong in a Kevin Smith film. I always think of Kevin. I think I read it somewhere that Kevin Smith made films about brainy people in brainless jobs.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, we all knew someone like that philosopher who was, with a 150 IQ who was serving at a petrol station or something like that. Yeah. Who just had no ambition in life or hadn't decided that they wanted to use that for anything useful at that point in time. They were quite content sitting around smoking bongs. Yeah. And I liked seeing that on the screen because while I can absolutely lay no claim to having been that person myself, but like I said, I knew a few of these guys, and I'm not sure I've seen it represented as quite so accurately before.
I will say the other thing that I feel like it represents very well is the feeling of abandonment. All of the characters, they go through these moments where they try and reach out for people for support, but their backs have been turned. Particularly Winona Ryder's parents, she reaches out like, I'm trying to find a job, I can't find anything, and they just like, oh, stick to it, you'll be fine, bye-bye, off you go. Like, yeah, they were just like, okay, you're 18, poof, out the door, bye.
I think they kind of had a point there, though, really. Yeah. They're like, she's like, I can't find anything in my field. And that does kick off a moment where she slums it a little bit and starts looking for jobs in fast food. This is after offending Vicky by turning down her offer to get her a job at the Gap. She says, I'm not working at the fucking Gap, I think, or something like that. And, I think that again, that's an interesting angle. I think, again, if you have a particularly specific or what you feel is an important degree, that's probably a trap one could fall into. And I remember that was something that you used to hear about a lot in the 90s. It was a common criticism from boomers that, and you hear it today, you hear it against Gen Ys, and I hear people say it about Gen Z now. They don't want to work. And I just kind of feel like, no, they want to work. They will work differently to how you work. And I think they see the inherent flaws in the boomer generation's, ideas about work. But I remember you used to hear about that. People have these degrees and they won't just take any job. They will have to, they have to have a job that meets what they studied. And I can see that to a degree, but I don't have a lot of sympathy for someone like that. If you're in a particular situation, like where you're desperate for money, take any job you can get. I've done it.
Yeah. I've done it all my life. No one hires creative writers. It's like, all right, well done. You've got a degree in you can read and write your own language. Well done.
Good for you. I mean,
I'm worthwhile.
It's a bit of a point of contention for me, having once upon a time shared a house with someone who absolutely would not do that. It had to be the very right job that they wanted to do at that moment in time, and they would take nothing less. And so
More
I guess
if they can do it, but
and I don't have a lot of respect for Leilana's. I have a little. Parents were somewhat dismissive, and you're right. Some support, they could have handled it better, but at the same time, she was being a little bit precious at that point.
Oh yeah. She was definitely princess mode.
It was interesting going back and watching it again. Another highlight for me was seeing Evan Dando at the end playing the character of Roy, I think, in the dramatized version of it. So Ben Stiller tries to buy Leilana's documentary she's making about her friends and turn it into an MTV show. I think there was in the 90s called The Real Life or A Real World or something like that. Real World. And it's like that, try and make it look a little bit like that. And she objected. So at the end of the film, he actually just takes the idea and makes it an actual soft scripted drama. Evan Dando, for those who don't know, is the lead singer of the Lemonheads, who were a band in the 90s who I'm sure very, very few people remember unless you were there at the time. I did actually bump into him physically once at a music festival. He's very big and he was fucking wasted.
Back in the days when we could touch people.
Back in the days where you could go to music festivals. So anyway, I'm glad we went back and had a look at it. I honestly kind of do have to say, though, I don't understand how this gets a 0.5 rating higher than Mystery Men, which I think is a significantly better film than this.
Agreed. But still, it was nice to go back to it after 20 years or so since the last time I watched it. It's like, all right, okay. I think it overall, whilst being somewhat cliched and very washed with the Gen X, I think it still kind of stands up, more or less.
I think that's due to the performances.
Yes.
I think, you stick anybody else in those two roles, and this is an uber forgettable mid-90s midday movie.
Yeah.
But these two people who just work so well together and individually, it elevates that, and probably, again, the soundtrack, I guess, because it's so memorable. And it has that Lisa Loeb song, which is, an incredible song that people will remember for a long time, I think, and it will be indelibly linked to this film.
Yeah. So
you have the keys from here, my friend.
I do, and I've got so many places that I could go, and I'm really torn as to where to go, but I'm gonna go somewhere. Oh, I don't know.
Thinking music.
No, we're not doing it. Do not do it. Okay, so I think I am going to go to. Yes, that is where I'm going to go to. I'm going to go to the 1985 film debut of Ethan Hawke in one of my favorite childhood movies, Explorers.
Oh, wow. That's a blast from the past.
Yeah. A boy obsessed with 50s sci-fi movies about aliens has a recurring dream about a blueprint for some kind, which he draws for his inventor friend. With the help of a third kid, they follow it and build themselves a spaceship. Now what? This is Ethan Hawke. It is River Phoenix, Jason Prieston, and tying into the forthcoming critical role, Legend of Vox Machina, a very young Taliesin Jaffe as Ludwig, one of the brothers. James Cromwell, directed by Joe Dante, whose name everyone should know. He is the guy who did Inner Space, Gremlins, Small Soldiers, The Howling, this. He was a stalwart of the 80s and 90s and doing some fantastic stuff. It's been not too long since I last watched this, and it goes a weird way.
I don't think I've seen it for probably since the 80s.
Oh,
I recall being a big fan of it at the time.
This is one of my brother's favorite movies growing up. And I just had to go back there, frankly. Just had to.
There we go. So we're going back to the 80s next week with Explorers.
Lovely. Okay, so that's that. And we're going to time code 0100. Is it time for our sponsors, Travis?
It is time for our sponsor this week, and they are. We have a particularly unique sponsor this week. I think you're going to enjoy it. We've had the movie trailers the last couple of weeks, but let me just cue it all up here.
Okay. Don't forget to use hashtag no discount at checkout for a 0 discount at checkout.
And I think that's particularly appropriate because there are some checkouts this week. We are sponsored this week by the 19th of February 1992 episode of the Australian game show Supermarket Sweep.
Supermarket Sweep. Let us go.
Welcome back. Supermarket Sweep. Here's a good game. Our partners have changed, and I thought they never would. We have Ian on 110. Well, that's 1 minute and 10 seconds as far as you're concerned. Elaine, 120, and Justin in front on 130. Here's our Coles Odd Man Out game. Have a look at your screens. Here's a gift pack for a new baby, a very new baby. Pick the odd man out. One of those products shouldn't be there. For a very new baby. Can you see it? Yes, Justin.
Fibre Plus.
Fibre Plus. Check that one out, please. That's the one we wanted. Well done, Justin. Put you further ahead. Let's invite your partners back. Chris, Karen, and Sylvia join us. This is our 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game. I'll give you 5 clues. And when you think you know what the product is that I'm referring to, buzz in, yell it out, okay? 110, yes, it's sort of a catch-up round here. We have 30 seconds at stake, a chance to get some more time for your super sweep, which is coming up after the next break. All right, here's the first one. English cheese. Most popular. Softer. Goes on easily. It's in a jar. English, yes, Chris?
Cream cheese.
Cream cheese is not what I'm after, really, no. Anyone else like to buzz in? You're out of this one, Chris and Justin. Anyone else? No idea? It's cheddar spread, Kraft cheddar spread. Never mind. Oh, the crowd have leapt to its foot. All right, here's your second chance. Rich dairy food, a Victorian ski resort. Whip it. Pour it. Butter is made from it. Is there anyone home? Rich dairy food. Yes, Karen?
Cream.
Cream? What sort of cream? Victorian ski resort? Buller cream I was after. I thought it was pretty easy. There's a person here from England who'd heard of it. All right, last chance for 10 seconds. And Karen, only a minute 10, only a minute 20 for Sylvia, a minute 40 for Justin and Chris. That's all the time you'll be allowed to spend in the Coles supermarket in a moment. So you need 10 seconds here. Originally from Belgium, that's a good clue, a vegetable, green, tiny cabbage, McCain's. Originally, yes, Justin? Brussels
Sprouts.
Yes, good boy. McCain's Brussels sprouts. They go even further ahead. In just a moment's time, we'll be seeing them race through this supermarket, going absolutely berserk. 110 for Karen, 120 for Sylvia, and 150 for Chris. Don't you dare go away.
Well, that's a thing. It looks just as bad as others.
This is the nitty-gritty.
It's just as bad as others. There we go.
Well, what a treat that was.
That was a thing.
That was a British game show first. Do you remember it?
I do remember Supermarket Sweep, and I do remember so many teachers thinking, yeah, we can replicate that in the school hall. They couldn't.
I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you.
All right. Now, where are we going to go to next?
I think you seem pretty keen on Critical Role, and there seemed to be a link from what we were just talking about to your interest in this new show.
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. So for anyone who doesn't know, Critical Role is a Twitch channel of voice actors, including Matthew Mercer, Laura Bailey, Ashley Johnson, Travis Willingham, Sam Riegel, Liam O'Brien, Taliesin Jaffe, and the new addition for Campaign 3 of Robbie Damon. They have been going for years now. They started off as just a group of friends just going around, and Matt Mercer was the dungeon master for their first campaign, which is based around the traveling group of Vox Machina.
What's that?
That's just the name of their group, Vox Machina. They were initially called the Shits, and then they they renamed. One of the characters recommended them maybe change your name if they're going to be dealing with royalty. And it's something that actually spawned from them just having this private game, and then Felicia Day, who is a creative director at Geek and Sundry, a Twitch channel, and was kind of co-founded with Will Wheaton. They brought them in and just said, hey, do you want to do this live on Twitch? And it became very successful, to the point where they're now on campaign 3, I think about 9 or 10 years after first starting. Third campaign, they've had multiple successful Kickstarter things for miniatures of the characters that they have. They've launched official Wizards of the Coast adventure books now, with the new one that's just up for pre-order now, which is Tal'Dorei Reborn. Tal'Dorei is the continent where the first campaign takes place. They've got the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, which is another continent in it. So it's this massive growing thing. And because of the success of, they launched a Kickstarter campaign where they were just going to have an independent few episodes of animated Vox Machina. Basically, it was going to serve as like an animated introduction for the pre-stream days of the group. It broke all the Kickstarter records and ended up being picked up by Amazon Studio and signed on for 2 seasons. We've got season 1 coming out on the 28th of this month, and it is basically going to show the origin of them coming together as a group, from what I understand, as well as it seems like campaign 1 is going to culminate in one of the most popular among critters, that's the fan name for themselves, for ourselves, which is the Briarwood arc, which goes deep into the backstory of Percival de Rolo, played by Taliesin Jaffe. And then from there, each time there's like different campaigns within the campaign, often just focusing on one character or another as they go a bit more into their backstory in present day. But at the same time, it's not flashbacks or anything like that. It's them just kind of like, oh, shit, something's come up that just so happens to be related to me in some way, shape, or form, or something along those lines. It is the best long-form improvisational storytelling that you can hope for. Matt Mercer is fantastic at crafting stories and crafting characters. These guys know how to use their voices and are very, very proficient with improv. So watching the actual Critical Role episodes is just a delight, how they try and break each other and get people to snap out of character, how they just play from one to another. There's a particular bit in I think it's the first episode of campaign 3. They've got all new characters in the different campaigns. And Sam Riegel's character is an automaton called Fresh Cut Grass. And they are asking, sort of like, oh, we've never seen an automaton before. Can you tell me about it? So like, oh, well, my name's Fresh Cut Grass. I was named after my creator's favorite smells. There was oatmeal, there was cinnamon, there was pussy, and it just instantly breaks pretty much everyone at the table because it's just out of blue. And then Ashley Johnson's character is just like, oh, well, I wasn't expecting that. And it's just so fun in the moment. It's a group of people just having a joke, essentially, but having this real emotional journey. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it translates to an animated linear storytelling arc without the injection of the in the moment improvisation. So excited.
I can say again, I don't get it. Like watching a bunch of people play a board game,
it's not a board game though. That's the thing.
It is a board game. It's got dice.
There's no board except the battle maps.
It's still a board game. It's like it's one step up from Sudoku.
Fuck you.
Sudoku with funny voices.
It is not at all.
Okay, look, in fairness, I'm still waiting for you to organize that mini campaign you promised a year ago.
It is coming. I now think I actually have enough people to make it worthwhile group.
I have committed. I've never played Dungeons & Dragons. I'm fairly certain it won't be for me. But there's only one way to find out for sure, and that's to try it. And I've committed to do that. But I kind of feel like this show is one big in-joke. And it's just happens to have 20 or 30 million people who are in on the joke, which is good for the guys who run it. But I kind of feel like if you're not in on the joke, then this show is probably not going to resonate with terribly many people who are not in on that joke.
I worry about that, but the people that they've got involved, the animation house of Titmouse, are fantastic animation, really good. They really know their stuff. These guys have decades and decades of experience in the industry on sort of like voice direction, acting, improvisation, writing, all of the things that they need. This is a passion project for them. I think that it's probably going to end up working in the same way that we've talked about ad nauseum, Pixar's multi-leveled entertainment of you can just get in, watch it, and enjoy it like as if it was just so happened to be an animated fantasy series. Forget the D&D element of it. That's not going to play into the animated thing at all. It is just an animated TV show. But for those who know the characters, there's going to be so much more. Like, I am certain one of the things that there's a bit of kind of battle music that they always play, and it's got this trumpet trill of, I feel pretty certain that at some point there's going to be fight, and someone on the parapets of a castle is going to do that trumpet, and it's going to just sound stupid, be played for laughs in the show, but anyone who is a critter is just going to go and laugh. There's going to be those in-jokes without a doubt, but these guys know how to, and they really care about including everyone. They are very big on inclusion for representation. They've had gay, non-gender, non-binary. They've had disabled characters in it. They are open to everyone, and they are very open to increasing and welcoming more people in. I just can't see, unless they fuck up on trying that, I can't see them creating a project that, and especially for Amazon to have backed as well and just gone, yep, we're giving you 2 seasons at least. I think they're going to probably have a stipulation in there somewhere just saying, hey, we need this to be more than just in-jokes. We need to...
Yeah, I'm sure they will try and make it a broader appeal. I just kind of... It has this overwhelming waft of nerdiness around it. And that's because I know what it is. Like, and, you know, it's like... do I really want to go down that rabbit hole? You know, is that what what am I saying about myself by watching this? Watching a bunch of people play a board game on
Shut up.
Twitch.
It's not. It's also it's storytelling where the fate of every action reaction is done by chance.
This is why I think I won't be very good at it, because I just don't know how seriously I can take it. But as I said, I will try it. I just feel like it's got this. Yeah, so it feels deeply, deeply uncool. But it's probably so uncool. It is cool because obviously the amount of people who watch this are like, it's stunning. Like I don't get it, but more power to them. It's perfectly harmless, and as you said, they're doing a fairly positive thing with representation, but I just don't know. It just feels icky.
This is going to be an uphill struggle for you.
I feel I'm walking in on somebody else's thing. I feel like I am walking into that guy walking into a bar and everyone's gone quiet and looked at the door. Like that's what I feel like about getting into something. Like
just stop playing and just like
pretty much. It's like the sort of a bush rolls across, anyway, but it's just probably just a me thing, but I'm just like, I want to watch a show about, a prequel to a bunch of people playing D&D.
But
okay.
See, you're looking at it in that regard, which is absolutely the wrong way of looking at it.
What way should I look at it?
The way if you were already an established fan of Critical Role, so like, oh my god, I get to go and see everything that they have done before. This is a great opportunity for me to go back and just see it, and the animation is beautiful. It's me reliving this story, blah 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 blah. But for someone who has not done Critical Role, who does not do D&D, you should just look at this as, oh, okay, there's a new animated show coming out. George is excited about it. Cool.
I'm not saying I won't watch it. I will watch it. I'll check it out. I just have a feeling that, like, without any understanding of, like, I mean, how, if I wanted to get into Critical Role, how would I start?
I would generally recommend people to go to their guest episodes that they had for campaign 1, where they split the team of Vox Machina and brought in, for one team they had Mary Elizabeth McGlynn and Felicia Day. And then in the other one they had Will Friedle and Will Wheaton come in. And they basically go off and do these, like, each group has 2 episodes where they are forced to kind of mingle with these new people. So it's a good introduction because they're reintroducing their own characters and you get to meet these new ones as well on these shorter episodes. It's not a full arc or anything like that. It's just 2 episodes with these guys, 2 episodes with these guys, and you get to see some of the depth and breadth of possibility that happens, because there's some emotional stuff that goes on that is pure role playing, where they're just having these conversations around the campfire and there's no dice rolls. But then there's other times where shit fucks up because the dice just weren't in their favor. And it's one of the most iconic moments in that particular one. One of the groups does something and something happens to an iconic item. And the other party are in the other room, in the green room, and the delay between the live moment and the stream is about 30 seconds, and it happens. And the guys in the main party who are playing, they're sort of like, oh my God, they're going to kill us. And then 30 seconds later, you just hear this, no! As they're all screaming because this shit happened. It's so good. It's so good. But even then, it's like one episode of Critical Role is on average 2.5 to 3.5 hours long. So it's still an investment. The best way to get into it is to play some D&D and just have people who are established, who know how to play D&D, who are good at just bringing a fully brought in character and what are referred to as ringers for new people. And that's what I want to do with you. I've got a couple of people who are going to be really good at that and help you get in. And you can invest into it as much as you want. You can create a character that is more reserved and doesn't interact too much, and that's just part of your character. Or you can go, you know what? I just want to be stupid and have a really stupid character or a really noble character or whatever you like, whatever feels comfortable for you to experiment. And the thing is, you may very well build like a rogue, for example, and say like, I'm really good at picking locks. You may roll and it fucks up. And it's like, it's up to you how you want to play that. You could just be really frustrated because you didn't succeed in the thing that you're supposed to be good at. Or you can play it in another way or however you like. It's entirely up to
I was
you.
going to base my character off Donald Trump. He doesn't, everything he does works out the way exactly as he expected to work out. If the lock didn't break, that's because the lock is rigged.
See, that is a fucking awesome character right there. That is great.
Anyway, we will see when we get to that. I will be curious to take a look and see how accessible it is. You're right. They really, when you're coming in with such a, a niche, a niche sort of IP, if you will.
Yeah.
That like it's a bit like we talked about this with Marvel, right? Like if you wanted to, if someone who didn't watch anything from Marvel ever before, and we said, hey, you want to get in, you should watch this. How the fuck do you get into Marvel now? It's like 8, 9, 10 years of lore you need to be across before it makes any sense. And so Marvel can get away with that because they're Marvel and they make the biggest films in the world. But Spider-Man this week became the 4th highest grossing film of all time. Critical Role probably doesn't have that luxury, so we'll see how they go. And they really need to make this, accessible to anyone and everyone.
It's a lot of uphill struggles that they have to do as well, because whilst Critical Role have phenomenal success in the field of Twitch, like apparently they were the highest profiting channel on Twitch according to some leaked data or something like that. They've had this record-breaking Kickstarter campaign. They've got this 2 seasons confirmed for them, but it's still an insular group. And D&D is, whilst the Wizards of the Coast who create Dungeons and Dragons have made so much effort to make it more accessible and open and easier to understand and to get into for new players, it is still that barrier of entry, and that there's a lot of stigma around it of, oh, it's a lot of maths, or, oh, I'm not really into playing a character like that. I don't want to make a character. There's a lot of hurdles and stigma around what it takes to actually play it that they've got to contend with as well. And then on top of that, it's also for people like yourselves if fantasy is not particularly your forte. It's like, okay, this is categorically stacked against you.
It's not really playing into my sweet spot, in fairness, but I respect the people who enjoy it, really like it, and they get a lot out of it. And I can see how you would. It's a game and it's social, and if you have a lot of fun, it's just don't know that it's for me, but we will see.
We will find out. We will have a session. We will actually. That could be a fun thing for us to stream. You making your character, us sitting down, and me going through helping you make your character and developing it. But we will have a session. We will have a session. It will happen. Now, I've talked more than enough about Critical Role. Do you want to talk about Being the Ricardos? Because you've had Being the Ricardos on the back burner.
Yes, actually, that's a good call. Being the Ricardos is kind of links because it is on Amazon as well. It is an Amazon exclusive feature, I guess you would say. Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting because I do it. I think we have a vote from Mon over here saying we should scream that me creating the character of Mango Mussolini, who is absolutely 100% right all the time. It's going to be huge. It's going to be great. People are talking about it already. Can you see?
This is awesome.
Yeah, it could be hilarious. It could be. I don't know about it. Montez Travis's D&D character development would be hilarious.
Yep,
that's open for debate, but we can do that. We can do that when we get there. Talking about Being the Ricardos, which is the Amazon Prime exclusive feature film around Lucille Ball. Follows Lucille Ball and her husband Desi Arnaz as they face a crisis that could end their careers and another that could end their marriage. This is written and directed by the one, the only, the incomparable Aaron Sorkin. Stars Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball, Javier Bardem as Desi Arnaz, J.K. Simmons in here, Tony Hale. If you don't know who Tony Hale is, he was in Arrested Development. He was Buster in Arrested Development for years. Ronnie Cox, Clark Gregg, a few other Brian Howe, a few other familiar faces in there. this is a story about basically 1 week in their career, where at the start of a week there's a hint of a story that could be leaking that at one point in time Lucille Ball was a member of the Communist Party. So this is set in the 50s, thinking McCarthyism, House American Activities Committee, and being outed as a communist. That's basically the end of your career, even for someone as insanely famous as Lucille Ball was at this point in time. Additionally, she's also dealing with the fact that she is pregnant, and they are trying to sort of how are they going to deal with that on the TV show, because she hasn't got very much longer before she starts the show. And this is the 1950s, and no one's pregnant on television in the 50s.
Nope.
Additionally, we've got another plot thread in here of her doubting her marriage with Desi, and his philandering, shall we say. And these are all interplayed against them trying to sort of put out fires amongst their co-stars. The co-stars being J.K. Simmons, who plays William Frawley, and Nina Arianda, who plays Vivian Vance. So I don't know. I can't remember actually ever having seen I Love Lucy, but that was sort of about they played those are their neighbors who are kind of two of their other main stars on the show. And both of them individually have other problems that sort of, or other fires that need to be put out along the way while, they're dealing with these sort of bigger ticket issues that they're working through. I liked this a lot, but I should note, I'm a Sorkin fan. I like what Aaron Sorkin does. I pretty much like everything he does. I like the way his characters talk. I like the worlds he builds for them. But if you don't, I don't know that you're going to get on board with this, because I talked last week about The French Dispatch and how that was the most Wes Anderson film that ever Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
This is the most Sorkin film that ever Sorkin. I've seen all of West Wing a number of times. I've watched The Newsroom two or three times. I watched most of Studio 7 on Sunset Strip, was the one that got cancelled because of a writer's strike.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We've got the Steve Jobs movie. We've got Social Network. Both of those are films I'm a big fan of. And this fits strictly into the Sorkin pattern. I'd say the film that this most closely resembles would be, what was his film called? Was it called Jobs? Was that what it was called? The Steve Jobs film he did? I can't remember, because it was the two of them.
Yes, it was.
It was the Ashton Kutcher one. It was anyway. This one most directly Steve Jobs. Sorry, Jobs was the Kutcher one. Steve Jobs was the Aaron Sorkin one. This one most closely resembles that. We've talked about it at length before. If you're going to tell a biopic about someone, you probably don't do what the Kutcher film did and pick and bite off Steve Jobs' entire life and try and tell it, with quick snippets of all the interesting things that happened to a guy who achieved that much stuff. You instead do what they did with Steve Jobs and pick a week or a couple of moments in someone's life. So 2 or 3 key moments, it kind of reveals that person's character. And that's what this is. This is the Steve Jobs 1 or 2 moments. In this sense, he's just picked one week. And in fact, kind of twisted reality a little bit, in the sense he's kind of compressed all these things that happened over a period of years in reality into 1 week.
Okay.
And then uses that as a way to sort of tell us something about their characters. I enjoyed that at the same time as I realized that was what he was doing. I was watching this going, God, this feels familiar. This feels so familiar. It feels so much like Jobs. If you can think about the Steve Jobs film, where we've got Steve Jobs going around dealing with what's the guy's name? I can't remember. Dealing with different problems. Wozniak. Steve Wozniak, played by Seth Rogen, and he's also dealing with he's got the thing going on with his daughter and his ex-wife, and he's got technical problems to deal with, and he's dealing with the guy from Pepsi who played Jeff Daniels I can't remember his name, but the guy who took over Apple after he left, and what's his name? I can't think of it anyway. So it's that kind of thing. So we've got Lucille Ball and Javier Bardem's Lucy and Desi kind of dealing with studio executives trying to sell them on an idea. that Lucy will be pregnant on the TV show, and they'll be able to do that and get away with it. At the same time as they're, the actor playing Vivian, is like, oh no, I'm feeling very unattractive playing, a very frumpy woman on television married to a man so much older who can't stand her. She's trying to put that drama down. And J.K. Simmons plays an alcoholic and is, let's put that fire out at the same time as this other thing over here. It's sort of them trying to spin plates, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I actually dug it. I thought it was really interesting. I thought the cast was excellent. I mean, the three main stars, and I don't know who Nina Ariana is. She was pretty good as well. I think she comes from a stage background, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But I think you might see a little bit more of her moving forward. But Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem, I thought were fantastic. It's one of the better things I've seen Nicole do for a while.
Yeah.
I believe that role was originally supposed to be played by Cate Blanchett. She would have been amazing in it too. But Javier Bardem, in fact, I think it's probably the standout for me. He plays the role with much aplomb. And in fact, I believe Desi Arnaz's actual daughter came out and said she rang its praises. So he doesn't look like him, but my goodness, he inhabited that character of someone with that bravado and charisma. Of Arnaz. And J.K. Simmons, well,
yeah, come on.
Does he ever put in, the guy doesn't put in a bad performance. Like the guy's, he's a
workhorse, man. He's a workhorse.
He's amazing. The film does try to deal with a few issues in here, a bit of women's roles in different things. And Alia Shawkat from Arrested Development is in this as well, and she plays a female writer on the writing staff. And what was it like for a woman to be in a comedy writing room in the 1950s and that sort of thing? Especially where the show is all about Lucy's the biggest star on the show, and she's a woman as well. I enjoyed it immensely. I think it was really good fun. But if you don't like Sorkin,
gonna be tough.
Maybe expect to find it a little bit annoying because he's pulling his old tricks. It's a classic hits collection by Aaron Sorkin. You've seen it before, but with different characters.
Okay. So now, because he's only directed 3 movies, Molly's Game, Trial of the Chicago 7, and this as movies, what would you like to see Aaron Sorkin do next? Because the way you're talking, it kind of sounds a little bit like he's now, maybe you've seen enough of this trick and you want to see him tackle something else or a different style. What do you think? What do you think's next?
I would like to maybe see him tackle something a little bit outside his comfort zone, maybe a different genre he's not used to. Maybe it's a bit like when Quentin Tarantino said he had an idea for Star Trek, and you're all like, "Yeah, I'll believe that when that happens." But my God, how interesting would that be to see Tarantino doing Star Trek, doing science fiction? Fuck yeah! Where do I sign up for that? And I mean, one thing I think you can't level at Quentin is he has bounced around his genres a little bit. He doesn't. He probably does what he does well, but he does it in different ways. Maybe I'd like to see something from Aaron Sorkin. I don't have a problem with doing. If you're good at something, no problem with you continuing to do that, right? Like AC/DC has made a 50-year career of playing the same song pretty much the entire time. And they're fucking awesome doing it. So why wouldn't you keep doing it?
That's fair.
I don't have a problem with that, but maybe step outside your comfort zone a little bit, like politics and that kind of thing is his jam. Maybe an action film, maybe a war film, science fiction, something like that would be. I would love to see his really verbose characters, quipping and stuff in a horror film, for example. I would like to see him do something like that, and maybe. When it comes to directing, he's done very talky films, I think, today. It would be interesting to see him. I mean, there was talk a couple of years ago, maybe he'd been having conversations with Marvel. I don't know that it ever came to anything, but that was in the news. I mean,
that's weird.
Would be a Sorkin, a Sorkin superhero film. Now, wouldn't that be interesting? I think how much more interesting would the Eternals would be if they're given it to Sorkin? Maybe had him write it at least, because Chloe Zhao does amazing visuals, but dialogue not so much. So,
my thought, I'll pitch this to you. the Jack Ryan TV show that they've had 2 seasons of with John Krasinski. Get Aaron Sorkin in to do the 3rd season.
I would be down with that. That would be. I haven't watched the 2nd season, so I don't know where it's at. But I would be interested to see him do a spy show. Would be interesting.
Just enough of that action that it's not completely out of his wheelhouse, but bringing a bit more of that CIA analyst political side that generally seems to be a little on the light side for a lot of those CIA things. They usually end up falling into that action movie rather than Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or something like that. I think that could be quite a good fit for Aaron Sorkin.
I think something like that would suit him. Yeah. And I would maybe a bit of action would be fun in there and see how we go through that. But
yeah,
I don't think we're going to see it. I think he's good at. I mean, apparently his next thing is a TV movie of A Few Good Men. I don't know if he's actually involved in that or he's just based on the fact that he wrote the original film. But look, I mean, I wasn't the Trial of Chicago 7. I don't know if that was quite in the same genre as the rest of his stuff. I don't know if you saw that. I didn't think it was as good as everybody else did.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think he's one of the best writers going around in Hollywood today. I don't know if he's quite in the same category of director as he is a writer. And that's fine. He's a competent director.
Yeah.
I think he's at his best when we see him paired with someone, as we did with Social Network, with a truly great director like David Fincher and a great writer. They can create magic.
Yes, 100%. 100%.
Can I dominate for a little bit longer and just move on to the thing I've actually been binging all week?
Yes, tell me.
So someone put me onto this last week. Yellow Jackets is the show, and I like to call that. It's actually, I don't know if you're familiar with the writer, the Australian feminist writer Clementine Ford.
Nope.
I don't know where she actually writes these days. She's an author, a writer. She used to write for some of the major publications, but I follow her on Facebook.
Okay.
She's a bit of a firebrand, I guess is one way to put it. But she did mention in one of her live streams that she's been watching this and enjoying it, and she thought it was one of the best shows on telly. Okay. I hadn't heard of it, so I thought I would give it a go. And wow, this one has really slipped beneath the radar. I don't know if maybe it's just me who missed it, but I haven't spoken to anybody else who's actually heard about it yet. It is streaming. It is a Showtime production. It is streaming on Australia, on Paramount, I think, Paramount Plus, which, exactly. Which is maybe why we haven't heard about it, or at least me, because who pays attention to what the fuck's happening at Paramount Plus? Like, why would anybody subscribe to that? Like, I see it pop up in my Amazon Prime going, ooh, you can watch this on Paramount Plus. I'm like, oh, my Prime subscription gets me Paramount Plus. That's cool. Oh, no, it doesn't. You want an extra $9 a month for me to watch that direct? No, thank you.
No.
But if they keep coming up with the quality of production of something like this, well, then maybe there is another contender for our money in contention, because this is probably... I am 7 episodes into a 10-episode run, and this might be the best TV show I've seen in the last 2 or 3 years. We're going to see where it lands. See if it sticks to landing, because, we were 100% on board for WandaVision as a great show, and they really didn't stick the landing on that one. So it kind of determines how it all goes down. But anyway.
Enough foreplay. What's this about?
What is Yellow Jackets? A wildly talented high school girls soccer team becomes the brackets unlucky survivors of a plane crash deep in the Ontario wilderness.
Okay.
So the girls soccer team are the Yellow Jackets. I think it's a kind of insect or something in America. Maybe a bee. I don't know.
I'm basing that purely off of Ant-Man.
Yes. Funnily enough, it is not about the character from Ant-Man, which is, everyone's been screaming for that spin-off now. I know that because they paint bees on their face. And their war cry is buzz, buzz, buzz. So I kind of put 2 and 2 together. So we have a girls' soccer team who won their state championship. One of their parents is very rich and hires a private jet for them to fly to Seattle, I think it was, to play off in the national championships. And in the midst of them flying there, they fly a little further north because of reasons, and they crash in the Ontario wilderness. The show actually opens with a chase through the snow of a girl by other people or women, and it ends in a particularly shocking way that really sets you up. And this show ain't fucking around. Like, this ain't Boy Meets World, right? Like, this is
Boy Meets Wilderness.
or Girl Meets World for that case. Either it's a little bit. Initially, you're kind of feeling like, okay, so this is a Jenna Bent reimagining of Lord of the Flies.
That's where my mind was going.
And there is some elements of that Lord of the Flies in there, but after that opening where you kind of go, oh, okay, that's where it's going to go, at least 7 episodes in, it's managed to really differentiate itself strongly enough from the William Golding story. Though I don't think the creators would deny its influence on them. So this has more of a mystery element to it than probably than something like a straight Lord of the Flies reimagining might. The story takes place in, at times, 3 different time periods.
Okay.
So we have scenes that take place, or even 4, really. We have many scenes that take place between the girls and their various goings on before the plane flight. We have scenes, I guess, what we might call either in the plane or after the plane has crashed, of them surviving in the wilderness. And then we have, I guess, what one might say is the main story plot, which is the girls, 25 years after the plane crash, the surviving girls, and who are now trying to solve, an ongoing mystery about someone who is, someone's killed one of them, and someone is now blackmailing them who claims to know what really happened in the wilderness and what really was involved in their survival.
So it's one part Lord of the Flies, one part Lost, and one part I Know What You Did Last Summer.
A little bit, not quite slashery as I Know What You Did Last Summer, but maybe a little bit, and also a little bit of Only Murders in the Building, because there's some true crime stuff going on in there, and a little bit of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it's a wonderful
blend.
It's a very tiny elements of some of those other things in there, It's a very interesting blancmange of of different genres and different ideas in there. And it's really compelling. It's setting up a really fantastic story to where I got really grumpy last night that I finished episode 6 and had to go to bed because I had to get up for work this morning. I really, given the opportunity, if I didn't have to work today, I would have probably binged through the rest of it. I think I went through the first 6 episodes yesterday. And they're 1-hour episodes, so they're not short.
You haven't done that in a long time.
No, I don't normally sit down and binge a show like that, but this story, just hanging on to it, I need to know what happens next. The characters are wonderful. It takes a little while. If I have a criticism, it takes a little while to really establish who our most key characters are, and who, in the sense of, when we're seeing them in the present, it's a little bit easier because we get some fairly recognizable actors playing them. We have Melanie Lynskey, who I think is one of the great underrated actors of our time. She
know the name.
Heavenly Creatures. She was fucking great in that.
There you go. Yep.
She was also in 2.5 Men, but we don't mention the war. We have Tawny Cypress, who I don't know the name. You're probably going to know the face. She's been in a fair few different things. If she's not, she was in Billions amongst other things. But I think she's gonna probably break out as a result of this role. We have Juliet Lewis, the great Juliet Lewis, who could forget Natural Born Killers. Christina Ricci getting a significantly meatier role than that she got in the latest Matrix film she was in for one scene. So we have the adult versions of the girls, and then trying to somehow figure out the girls when we flash back to the past. which one we're looking at. Some of them are easy because the younger version of Melanie Linsky's Shauna looks exactly like her. So you're like, oh, okay, that's Shauna. And the character who Christina Ricci's character is named Misty. The younger Misty's pretty easy. The younger Juliet Lewis is pretty easy. But there's a few others you kind of like, hang on a second, which one's that one again? But once you kind of pick it all together, you go, oh, okay, this is pretty good. The acting is first class. The story and the tension they're building is unbearable. Like, I can't wait to get to the end and figure out what's going on. And I'm just like, please don't disappoint me, guys. Don't just let this to be another ghost story, or it was all a dream or something like that. Don't
please
give me,
be the one. Be the one.
Don't just be the mystery lost version of a Skybeam. Something like that. I'm really hoping for it to swerve me a little bit and just really give me something unexpected. Or if you have to give me something expected, make it good.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's not pulling any punches. It's pretty brutal with its violence. Not a whole lot in the way of nudity or anything like that to worry about if that's your concern. But like I said, the violence in here is it's up front and it's unwavering when it needs to be. It's not gratuitous violence. It's not happening constantly throughout an episode, but it happens frequently enough that you know that anyone could die at any given moment, except for girls who survive, because we know they survive. But the rest of them, you're like, well,
do we?
Well, if it's got a Lost sort of vibe to it, maybe they're all dead. But wasn't that what was happening in Lost? I don't remember.
No one knows. Not even the actors or writers. Anyone. No one knows. It's just whatever you want it to be.
So yeah, it's really quite aggressive. It's like in the most recent episode, we saw one of the girls killed by wolves, and again, that's not a pretty sight. So if I have a concern, I'm like, there's a bit of supernatural stuff creeping in here, and I'm like, okay, that makes me a bit sus because supernatural stuff, it can get a bit lazy, like, it was a ghost, or it was on an Indian burial ground or something like that.
It happened because it needed to. Shut up, move on.
Pretty much. So look, some of the characters in here I think are going to be some of the more memorable ones from any show I can think of. Christina Ricci's Misty is fucking terrifying.
Okay.
And in an incredibly non-threatening way. She doesn't look like she'd knock over a fly kind of thing, but when you see her, what she's prepared to do, it's Hannibal Lecter shit, and it's I can't give it enough praise. It's fantastic television at its absolute best. The people behind it are Ashley Lyle and Barton Nickerson. Not names that roll off my tongue. I can't say I've heard of them, but they were responsible for the Narcos and Narcos Mexico series on Netflix. Okay. I haven't watched them, but I know that they are very highly praised.
Yeah. I haven't delved into those either, but they always come up as some of the best stuff. Maybe I'll get around to it.
Well, there's no shortage. I was saying this sort of people this week on my Facebook, it's pretty easy these days to miss stuff. There's so many different streaming services. Even in Australia, we're up to 5 or 6?
Disney, Netflix, Amazon, Stan, Binge,
Paramount.
Kind of SBS on demand, maybe.
You as well. If you count the free ones, that's around 8 different streaming services. Not counting the freeware streaming catch-up channels and. And I'm assuming nobody here is stupid enough to subscribe to Tubi. I believe there's a horror.
The butcher is in the building, and he is bearing knives.
There's a horror streaming service I think is available to Australians as well. So that's it's a bit niche, but it has original stuff streaming on there. You can't see over. So it's going to happen, especially if you're streaming on one of the smaller platforms.
Yeah,
like Paramount, but you might slip beneath the radar. So, please take this opportunity to take this recommendation and give it a look if you're curious at all, because I don't think you'll regret it.
Okay, all right. Shall we finish off with a bit of a talk of 2021?
Sure, that's a good call.
Yeah. Okay. So the best of 2021. Get a time code in there.
So I will start with. I guess yours is in no particular order. Would I be right in saying that?
That is absolutely right. It reflects the rest of my life.
Touche. I've cheated a little bit as well. Some of these films were made in 2020, but were released here in 2021. And that may be a part of it's because of lockdowns and things like that. But, it's a weird time. My number 5, my first off the list, I'm going to go with is Riders of Justice. Which is the Mads Mikkelsen Scando. I don't even know where it's from. Scandinavia or Denmark or somewhere like that. Actually, Denmark is in Scandinavia, idiot. But it's about where we go here. Marcus goes home to see his teenage daughter Matilda when his wife dies in a tragic train accident. It seems like an accident until a mathematics geek, who's also a fellow passenger on the train, and his 2 colleagues show up, and it sort of turns into a bit of a Taken kind of vibe from there. So it's sort of a comedic action thriller, and I believe it's getting a remake.
Okay, interesting. I just did a quick date check on a bunch of mine and realized most of them for 2018.
Right. Wow.
I will say that like the ones that still definitely do make the cut. Last week we talked about Encanto, and that was quite a standout just for the animation on its own. It was genuinely stunning. We talked about it ad nauseum last week about how much we loved.
Did that come out last year?
That was oh no. Oh, damn it, I've lost another one.
I'll pay it. Close enough. It came out in January.
I technically came out 2021.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Absolutely great film.
Yeah, really, really great film. The voice acting, the music, the story that it was going for, everything about it just all worked really well. It was telling a different story than what we traditionally used to getting in animation, and it, like we said last week, it harkened back to narrative songwriting as well, not just here's just a musical number because reasons. It's informative and it progresses the story when they have those songs. And we don't talk about Bruno, prime example of that, and just the way that they explain things through the song. Very well done. Lin-Manuel Miranda did a great job. So yeah, that's my first one.
Cab off a rank. Yes. My second cab off a rank here is Judas and the Black Messiah. So if you go back in time, I think we talked about this probably around about May last year. So this is it's won a couple of Academy Awards, I think. Most notably, I believe it was Daniel Kaluuya who won for Best Supporting Actor. It also won Best Achievement in Music for Original Song. This is offered a story about the Black Panthers and offered a plea deal by the FBI. William O'Neill infiltrates the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party to gather intelligence on Chairman Fred Hampton. Starred as a Daniel Kaluuya, Lakeith Stanfield, Jesse Plemons, also known as Meth Damon, Martin Sheen as J. Edgar Hoover. This is a really powerful little film about relationships that can build up in these sort of situations. Probably a fairly standard sort of story. We've seen it before of like, what was that Johnny Depp film where he plays an undercover guy? Was it Donnie Brasco or something like that?
Yeah, Donnie Brasco.
But it was really an interesting little inquiry into a fascinating snippet of American history. And my God, Daniel Kaluuya can act his goddamn ass off. He's so good.
He is so damn good. I kind of feel bad that he was in such a somewhat forgettable role in Black Panther because he is so strong. I would love to see him in a starring role in a big movie, which invests its time in character driven, because he is a talent that's just ready to explode.
Well, he's got an Academy Award under his belt now, so I assume he's now put his price up. So good luck to you, Daniel.
Yeah. My next one off the ranks is the Netflix one that I talked about quite animatedly, The Harder They Fall, with Idris Elba, Jonathan Majors, Zazie Beetz, to name but a few. I really loved this one. It was that kind of popcorn exploration into the Old West. I do love my Western movies. This was just done with, like I was saying with Encanto and the narrative songwriting, this has narrative backstory for the characters, and using the fact that it is a 99.9% black cast to inform on the time period and the stories behind each of them. It was just a brilliant medley. It didn't try and take itself too seriously. It had that pulpy kind of vibe that I really love. The action was really good. The performances were great. Jonathan Majors and Idris Elba are just two charismatic motherfuckers that just, you get them on screen, you get them talking to each other, and suddenly you just go, yep, I'm happy right now. I don't care. Their voices are amazing. The way that they are just emoting so much through their voice, through their eyes, through these little tiny nuanced movements of their hands and their head movements, and it was just really, really well done. It was a tour de force for actors. Absolutely loved it. And this was a Netflix movie.
I actually saw that pop up on a few critics' end year lists. So
yeah,
it's just apparently
enjoyable. It's not awards movie material or anything like that, but it just, like I said when I talked about it on the show a couple of weeks ago, it makes its statement on what kind of movie this is going to be from the get-go, and it just goes, yep, you're either in or you're out. Oh, you're still here? Cool, we're going for a ride. And I love the confidence of it. Really brilliant.
Up to number 3 now for me, and it's starting to get harder here. But I went with Suicide Squad that we talked about.
That would be my 3. That would be my number 3.
We kind of jerked off over James Gunn earlier. In the real brilliant thing about the Suicide Squad, I think, I mean, we didn't really cover earlier, but the original. Well, I remember when I read the announcement of the original Suicide Squad, and they had the cast. At that point in time, Tom Hardy was attached, but the rest of the cast was pretty much as it was. I'm like, that sounds fucking brilliant. Jared Leto as the Joker sounds like a great move. Like, he'd come off Dallas Buyers Club. He just won his Academy Award. And I know people like to diss Jared Leto. He does a lot of crap films, but he is a capable actor when he wants to be. I remember going, fuck yeah, I can't wait to see this. When the trailers come out, and you're like, yes, this is exactly what I want from a DC film. And then you saw it, and you're like, oh wow. That is powerfully awful movie.
For everything that we repeatedly talk about with the ending of WandaVision, that original Suicide Squad movie did it 1,000 times bigger and worse.
It's anyway, you're going to a rabbit hole of saying why that film was awful. It's awful, awful movie. And now you're going to remake it like 5 years after the first one came out. You're like, geez, I tell you, that's an interesting turnaround. And James Gunn produces a sequel, reimagining, soft reboot kind of thing. He picks up and goes, what worked about the original? Harley Quinn worked. Rick Flag kind of worked. And Viola Davis was fucking great as Amanda Waller. Let's keep them. And let's Captain Boomerang kind of work. We'll keep them. Unfortunately, didn't keep him for long. Then just throw the rest of that junk away and recast the rest of the roles and make something that is loud, colorful, violent, hilarious, fun, and touching.
Absolutely.
And he nails every single one of those beats. The fight scene where Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn,
the color,
colorful, the flowers and stuff, where she takes on all the guys in the big palace or whatever it is, shits all over the Harley Quinn. I know there are going to be people out there who strongly disagree with that, but I always think
the emancipation of one Harleen Quinzel,
that so much better than her standalone film. In the sense, that's what she should be. She should be kicking ass. She should be fluffing around shooting beanbags at cops. Like
perfect sandwich.
It was he just got that character so right. And to pick up characters like Ratcatcher too, like what a stupid name for why would you and Polka Dot Man and make them fucking awesome.
Yeah, and really empathize with those characters so much. Like, okay, what's going on? This is some kind of witchcraft.
And animated shark voiced by Sylvester Stallone is the breakout star of the whole thing. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You can't do that.
Yep.
But he did.
Yep.
It's the most fun superhero film. Mm-hmm. That came out last year until my number 2.
Ah, okay. Well, I would just, because you stole my number 3 there. I will talk about my tiebreaker for number 2.
Yes.
Interesting. One of them, not 2021. It was 2020, but I didn't get to see it until last year, and that was Soul, Pixar's Soul. And the other one is No Time to Die, Daniel Craig's last outing as James Bond.
I really enjoyed Soul. I haven't seen James Bond yet.
Yeah. I'm a fan of Bond movies. I like them all for their own credits and merits. This was a great swan song to send Daniel Craig off into the sunset and to kind of finish this. Where they go from here, who knows? I kind of feel like the amount of time it took, because No Time to Die should have been out a year before, and COVID happened, and it just kept on getting delayed. I feel like they need to have some time to breathe and really decide what they want to do, what the new feel for the James Bond movies is going to be. I feel like it needs to be changed.
What would you do? You've got negative photos of Barbara Broccoli. So you get to cast the next James Bond. Who would you pick?
I really don't know who I would pick. Tom Hiddleston was fantastic in his public audition in The Night Manager for the role of James Bond. He would be brilliant. Idris Elba is a big fan favorite, and he would kill it in any role. He always does. I would kind of like them to do maybe a gender swap if they actually make it part of the fucking character. And maybe this Bond, one of the reasons why they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder and they frequently go rogue is because M is a fucking asshole. And don't gender bend everything. Let's keep M, like Dame Judi Dench was fantastic as M. Ralph Fiennes was great as the new M. But let's get a new female M and have it antagonistic there. 2 women, just these really strong, well thought out, intelligent women having these ideas, and just have that go, because that's a rich opportunity to show something different in this world, and bring some new, fresh vitality to the world of Bond. Bond is a fictional character. Does not matter about gender.
It can be whatever it needs to be. Yeah. Yes.
If you're gonna change it, though, make it part of the character. Make it inform the story, please. If you really want to, the first villain they go up against is a misogynist. Sure, why not? Make it easy. Make it easy to hate that person.
That would be lazy. That would be very lazy.
Oh, of course it would. But it would be a cheap, quick way of introducing. But at the same time, cheap, quick female action movies, we're getting a lot of those, unfortunately, with Black Widow, with that the 355 one that's just come out this year, with so many of the ones that's like, okay, yeah, it's a strong female lead. It's like, yeah, but you're not doing anything interesting here. Give them something to do, please. But I honestly don't know what I would do. I would kind of like to see them, maybe Aaron Sorkin, get more of that political spy element on it rather than the action element, where Bond, the Bond character, is infiltrating things through debate, conversation. That was one of the real things that worked with Casino Royale, was the intimacy of the poker table and the intimacy of having so much set in a single room. It would be fucking that's the opening to that movie, where he's just sitting down having a conversation in the black and white sequence of Casino Royale. That was great. Again,
I have 2 hot takes that could do it for me. Hot take 1, John Boyega. Love him. Would love a Chav James Bond.
Okay.
I know they kind of did that with the Kingsman, but if we did it without the jokes,
Okay.
I love John Boyega. I think he was massively, powerfully wasted by Disney in the Star Wars sequels.
Yep, very fair.
Real super hot take. Sacha Baron Cohen could do anything he puts his mind to.
That is 100% true. That is an out of left field thought, and I'm kind of all for it.
He's never done action before, really, except in stuff like Grimsby, which was like a joke, but surely he could.
That would be interesting.
Whatever it was like, he was like originally from Israel or something like that. You know, he was like a trained by the Israelis. I don't. Anyway, it's an idea. They'll do what they'll do. I'm looking forward to seeing it when I get a chance. My number 2, and this is a tight call. My number 2 is Spider-Man: No Way Home.
Okay. Well,
I think we talked about this every week at length. I won't go into too much more detail, but it's just fun. It's just, I know it's fan service, and it didn't necessarily break any new barriers in trying to tell a different story or subverting expectations or anything like that. But Chloe Zhao was trying to do a little bit with Eternals, except there's something to be said for if you do something that's relatively straightforward, but you do it perfectly, as opposed to doing something difficult and fucking it up completely. We give you some respect for trying something hard, but you still fucked it up. So, a good sponge cake made perfectly is a beautiful thing. And I think that's what Spider-Man is. And I think it still did something a little bit different. It was playing around with the multiverse for the first time in live action, Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that didn't come necessarily. You could have screwed that up. You could have made it too confusing. They put the great power, great responsibility speech in there again. This time with Aunt May. And of course, I go back to it again, like what for people who criticize it for not necessarily trying very hard to do anything difficult. There is something to be said for escapist cinema, and I have not heard the outpouring of joy that this film brought out in people in many other places. Like Australian, maybe it happens in American cinemas, but people don't shout and clap and cheer in Australian cinemas. It doesn't happen. Like I've said it again, the only other time I ever saw it was in Endgame, when all the heroes came back. The on your left moment, and the moment where Cap holds Mjolnir. Those are the only moments I've seen that even approach what I heard during the Spider-Man screening I was at. So it made me happy. It made the fans happy. And, it was fun and entertaining and all at the same time. And, I thought it was genius. And I think it's only downhill. But it's going to be so hard for the guys at Marvel, Sony to come up with anything that approaches that whenever they decide to go back to the Spider-Man films.
Yeah, it's gonna be a challenge. They're gonna be a victim of their own success potentially. I think one of the big things that makes it winning for me, it's not in my top 5, and the fact that they're trying to push it for Best Picture in the Oscar nominations, no, it's a different kind of movie. It's a fantastic movie, but anyway, it's one of the since Endgame, this kind of feels like its own unique story, standalone from everything else. Everything else that Disney, Marvel have shown us since Endgame has basically been feeding and preparing for the next thing, the next big Avengers team-up movie. And you kind of get that in this because you get the 3 Spider-Mans together, and you do get that team-up kind of element. But at the same time, I said this when we talked about the movie ad nauseum, it's still laser focused on Peter Parker, and not Spider-Man Peter Parker, but Peter Parker as Peter Parker and his struggles and his strifes. And everything is good when he is Spider-Man. He makes everything fun and exciting and thrilling, but it's dramatic and relatable and empathetic when he is the Peter Parker character as well. And that serves it so well. That was one of the things that worked really well with Shang-Chi. The relationship between him and Katie, and him and his dad, goes off on flights of fancy at the end with the dragon and things like that. But it still just told a, despite being a multiversal story, it actually told a simple story of a young man, a young growing man who wants to just live a normal life. And it didn't do it in any overly complex way of going into these deep emotional rabbit holes or anything like that. It just told it. And it just so happened to coincide with physical manifestations of his problems in a weird way. It did well.
Now, what's number 2 for you? You've had number 2. Are we at number 1 for you now?
We're at number 1, yeah, because I cheated with a little bit with Soul and No Time to Die. So number 1 for me, it's not going to really surprise anyone. It's the movie that I've been waiting for a while. It's Dune. Come on. Denis Villeneuve. Phenomenal visuals. Hans Zimmer delivered one of his best musical scores. It had the emotional soberness and loneliness of what he did for The Dark Knight, but it brought in this beautiful kind of synthy element of original Alien music, and the performances were fantastic. Timothée Chalamet is possibly my favorite young actor working right now. He was phenomenal in Little Women. He was amazing in The King in 2018 or 2019, whenever that was. He was great as Muad'Dib. He's going to have one hell of a shining future. The all-star cast behind them in this movie was fantastic. I loved how they translated the book into the movie. They kept in the essential stuff. They lost some really important things for the book, but it still made coherent sense. They spent a little bit too much time maybe on the dreams of Chani, but overall, this was a huge win for me. A huge win for me.
I know I'm really the old one out here who just thought it was just way too long and way too slow. But I think it's if you're either on board with the Dune stuff or you're not. But I'll pay it. It looked gorgeous. It sounded amazing. The costumes are amazing. The effects were amazing. He just needed, Denis Villeneuve just needed, again, that person to tap him on the shoulder and go, mate, cut 2 or 3 of those. They've got the point. I think they get the point. I think they get the point with Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya are going to end up being important together. And they're going to get together like, we don't need to see it 74 times. Yeah. Oh, God, that second half was boring.
I feel like every director in the edit room needs to have this little Post-it note on the corner. Can you cut 5 minutes? Just 5 minutes.
5 minutes would have made a difference, I guess. But anyway, I know it's a very, very deep, long story. So he needed, I think, 2.5 hours is probably fairly disciplined. I imagine there'll be a special edition DVD coming out, a la the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings ones. It'll be like 4 hours long or something. And there'll be people out there like yourself and plenty of people who'll be like, oh, yes, give me more.
Yeah. And the fact that it did well enough to get part 2, that's great as well.
It's great. He's a great filmmaker, Denis Villeneuve. Despite the fact I thought it was too long and boring, doesn't detract from the fact that I understand what he's achieved there is remarkable. My number 1 film is technically came out, was in 2020 other places, but came out in 2021 here.
Okay.
And it's a significantly smaller story than Dune and Spider-Man. I've gone with Promising Young Woman. This is the feature, the first feature film by director-writer Emerald Fennell. Emerald Fennell starred as Camilla Parker Bowles in The Crown, if you don't know who that is. You will know who she is because she is a major new talent, I think, based on this film. This stars Carey Mulligan and Bo Burnham and Alison Brie, Clancy Brown, Adam Brody, a few other people you might recognize in there as well. Christopher Mintz-Plasse, a.k.a.
McLovin.
Laverne Cox in there as well. A young woman traumatized by a tragic event in their past seeks out vengeance against those who cross their path. So Carey Mulligan, he plays a woman who gets drunk, he pretends to get drunk in bars to the point where she can't control herself, or she can't stay awake, or she doesn't know what's going on, and allows men to take her home under the pretense that they're looking after her. And then when they try to start taking advantage of her, she basically calls them out on their shit. And what a genius film this is. Just at a little point where Emerald Fennell deliberately cast the men who take Carey Mulligan home to basically rape her. She deliberately cast men who were known for playing friendly, likable characters on sitcoms and in comedy movies. So, like we talked about, Kristen Mintz-Plasse and McLovin is one of those guys who takes Carey Mulligan home and attempts to rape her, and he keeps going on, but I'm a nice guy. And we know him as the funny, lovable, quirky McLovin, or Adam Brody, I think, might have been one of the other ones. I wasn't overly familiar with most of the actors doing it, but I'm like, that guy was on a sitcom, I think. And that's a nice little nod to it. You can't really base these decisions off what the man looks like, or seems nice, and they might claim to be nice guys, but they have absolutely no self-awareness about what they're doing. This film rocked my world. I just sat there for a minute, I think, after the film finished, and just sort of had to take a breath and go, fuck, man, I feel like I need a shower after that film, after just the disgusting characters that Emerald Fennell has created. The ending, I found it a little bit convenient. Other people will disagree with me on that one. I thought it was a little bit Scooby-Doo, which is probably out of sync with a lot of the rest of the film, despite the fact it was actually a very satisfying ending. But the fact that I got a satisfying ending kind of wasn't what I was expecting from this film. I believe Emerald Fennell won Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars earlier in the year. I think she deserved Best Picture. This is a significantly streets, miles, daylight lengths better than Nomadland, which won. And she deserved Best Director as well, because the film looks incredible. Everything in this film is done for deliberate effect. It's a must-see for anybody with young boys. I'd say it's a pretty shocking in parts, but if you got a teenage boy, I would sit him down and watch this film with him as a parent, if you could. I think is an incredibly important message to send to men everywhere to think about what they're doing and how we're raising the next generation. It was mind-blowing. Well-deserved number one film of the year, despite the fact it came out in 2020 most other places.
Fair enough. I will accept your loophole.
Well, benefits to being like, you're all right, though. You sort of said at the start that there was a bit of a dearth of really good films to pick from.
Yeah.
I had to kind of dredge a little bit to find stuff I'd seen this year that I thought was worthy of a top 5.
Yeah. So, because the other things that were in there that I hadn't watched before this year, I briefly mentioned it, The King with Timothée Chalamet on Netflix. Black Klansman, I didn't watch that until this year, and that was fantastic. And we both really enjoyed our Chain movie a couple of weeks ago, Can You Ever Forgive Me? But they were from like 2018, 2019.
Honorable mentions for me were Minari and Free Guy.
Oh, yeah. I'd forgotten about Free Guy entirely. Wow.
This show got a lot longer than I thought it would.
Yeah. We had some good things to talk about. All right. Well, let's wrap up the show for there. The next week, we've got a new Chain movie, which is the permanent love of my childhood, Explorers. We'll probably talk more about Peacemaker, the latest Boba Fett. I think no, I don't think Critical Role. I might have some early thoughts on Critical Role by next week. Oh no, it'll be Wednesday night that I'll be able to get some early screenings on that one, so I get to see the first 2 episodes early. Yay! Because I backed it on Kickstarter. That's why. Not because we have suddenly broken through and we now have access to this.
I was going to say, we get access to things now. Like, I'd be okay with that.
Of course, we will have our weekly sponsors that are entirely relevant and poignant to the times. And lots more, no doubt. So anything else final that you need to say, Travis?
No, I'll be watching next week. I watched. We haven't got time to talk about it, but I watched a Jake Gyllenhaal film from 2013 called Enemy the other night, which is actually also a Denis Villeneuve film. And so if we have a chance, we'll talk about it next week. It has potentially the most terrifying final scene in a film I have ever seen.
There we go. We'll find out next week. On that lovely note, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on Twitch, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. It does
All
really
the places.
help. All the places, all the spots. Until next time, good night.
Good night.